Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim. We talk about horror movies on this show, and in this episode we're following up from an episode we just did, which should have went up earlier this week, which was the original Suspiria, with of course the remake of Suspiria, which came out last year, which you never got a chance to get to until now. So we're going to talk about the Suspiria, the remake, and we're going to start spoiler free, of course, as we always do, and we'll give you a warning in the middle before we get into spoilers. So I'm very curious to see how this goes and how we both feel about this. First of all, I'll say this. I was not expecting the 2.5 hours runtime.
Yeah.
I will say that. I feel that this might be the longest movie we've ever reviewed on Streams After Midnight.
Really?
It might be.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess this would fall under the category of prestige horror that we kind of been getting these, I don't know, maybe a little more artsy or whatever you want to call it, kind of horror movies the last couple of years. But I guess they usually tend to be just about 2 hours, usually not longer than that.
Yeah, it just looks like I can't think of anything else we've done on this show in 300 episodes that was. So that's cool. So yeah, Suspiria, the remake. Obviously, we reviewed the first one. We didn't just review that. I mean, we reviewed that a couple of weeks ago now for us, but that went up earlier this week. These will both go out in the same week. That is my fantastic game plan that's happening. So this is so
fantastic.
So this
fantastic podcast, and where to find them.
I know. Don't compare our podcast to Harry Potter thing. How dare you? How dare you? I feel like this podcast is far more a series of unfortunate events than it is.
Oh, good one.
Yeah, there you go. So Suspiria, obviously the remake we talked about, Argento's original, and now we're talking about this one. This is directed by Luca Guadagnino.
Sure.
Guadagnino? I don't know. This is a very foreign name. I have no idea how to pronounce it. But he directed. We
apologize, but that's a good. Yeah.
He directed Call Me by Your Name. So this is someone who's has made an Oscar nominated and I think maybe even winning in some categories film. So so definitely a more prestige horror movie, I guess, if you want to call it that. It's definitely
he had to get his Oscar out of the way so he could pursue what he really wanted, was that horror. Yes. Which is, let's face it, that's what every director wants to do.
Yeah, so that's a Suspiria remake. Yeah, so that was the dream project. Everything else was just in service of getting to this. So he's directed it, and we have obviously a cast in here that's quite notable. Dakota Johnson and Tilda Swinton being the two kind of leads, but I'd also argue that Mia Goth is also one of the main characters, and then less of a role but still there in a kind of an important aspect of the plot is Chloe Grace Moretz. So we have an interesting cast, and we have
she loves horror remakes.
she does actually, yeah, it's weird, but we have this movie where, you know, I didn't really have any opinion on it for the longest time, and then the trailer came out, and the trailer looked surprisingly kind of good. It was like, this looks like it's got style, and not even the same style as the original. It looks like a completely different, because the original's all colourful, and it's all these greens and reds, and all these lights that are kind of weird, and it's all this synth music. This movie, just from the trailer, never mind the actual movie, is like the complete opposite of that. It's all muted, it's all like quiet and stark, and quick cuts, and, you know, all these things. So right away, I was like, okay, it's definitely the director's clearly doing their own thing with this one, and it made me intrigued as to what it was going to be. So, if you don't know the plot of Suspiria, but you should from because the plot at least starts the same as the original movie, and you know, American girl arrives in Germany. It's actually still set in 1977, and she goes to this school. She auditions, she gets in, but of course, there's something more sinister going on. What's weird is that in the original movie, I would have said it was a spoiler to reveal what the people at the dance school were. In this movie, it's actually basically, you know, we find out really early on. It's kind of like an ongoing thing that we know that the tutors at this school are actually a coven of witches. That is not a spoiler in this version. That is known information very early.
Yeah, basically, like the opening scene is, Patricia, Chloe Grace's, character is basically in a therapist's office, just relaying that.
Yeah, and then we even get it confirmed. We see them talking and kind of plotting, the covenant very early on, like the first 20 minutes maybe. So That's not a spoiler. So so the movie keeps that, and then there's some differences that goes on. Of course, it's got a very different style, very different focus.
Yeah,
and
it's. I mean, like you said, it is kind of like complete 180 where the first one when we talked about in the first review is that it's not really a plot driven movie. It's more a an aesthetic driven movie where you remember it more for the visuals and the bright colors and the music, and it seems like this is the exact opposite where everything is very drab and plain, and there isn't even really the music is very subtle as well, but it's like still like really beautiful in that way. Like it it still looks really good. It's just that it's not as like dynamic, but it still like makes a lot of use of this kind of like depressing kind of desolate place.
It still has a style. I think it's the key thing to say here. It's a completely different style to the original, but it still has a visual style. It's still doing something that required thought. It's still got this distinct kind of feel to it. So I mean that's the movie essentially. We'll talk about obviously where the plot goes in spoilers, but did you enjoy the Suspiria remake, Timothy?
I did actually. I liked it a lot. So I watched it twice at this point. I saw it once in theaters, and I just watched it about a week ago for the show. And I'd say when I saw it in theaters, I was like really blown away, and I left really digging it. And I still liked it a lot, when I watched it last week. But the big difference, I think, between the viewings is when I watched it in the theaters, I was really, captivated by it, and I didn't notice the runtime. When I watched it at home, I definitely felt the runtime. Like I like the movie a lot, but my biggest criticism is it does not need to be this long.
Yeah, it's 2.5 hours, which for a horror movie is like so really long. Like I am shocked. See, when I watch a horror movie, I'm surprised if it's over 100 minutes because they're usually 80 to 90 minutes. Most horror movies fill that kind of time frame. And it's not to say that I don't appreciate the slower pace this one takes, because I actually do. Yeah, I liked the movie. I didn't love it. I think the ending kind of let me down a couple of places.
All right, well, let's. All right, so we gotta be spoiler free.
Yes.
I would say, all right. So there's the ending with a big set piece, and then there's like a little bit after that. So are you talking about the big set piece, or are you talking about the kind of the little stuff that happens after?
The big set piece.
Oh, you aren't saying that. That was so cool. I love that.
There was parts of it that I liked. There was a couple things I hated about it.
Interesting. All right.
So,
We'll see.
One thing in particular that's springing to mind. Once we talk about it, but we'll dive into it. But
here's the thing. Like I think I really like this movie, but I wouldn't necessarily like try to argue with someone that says they don't like it, because it's a really slow burn, so you really have to be in for it. I think to get it. And there's like a lot of stuff that happens throughout that I think is good, and maybe like kind of horrific in like these subtle ways. But I mean, if you're looking at like kind of pure horror, there's probably only like 2 or 3 actual like instances where that happens. But I think those instances are really good, especially one which I think is probably one of the best like body horror scenes I've seen like ever in a movie.
I'm fairly certain I know which one you're talking about. No, like I like the slow build. I think I love the direction of this movie. Like there's a lot of really like just these quick little edits that make you feel kind of uncomfortable. There's like scenes where Dakota Johnson's character comes to the school and she's auditioning, and there'll be these like quick zooms and cuts to Tilda Swinton's face as she's watching, and it'll just feel kind of stark and just feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like she's just honed in this victim, like because they're going to groom her for something, and it's just it works really well.
You know what it is? This is I mean I haven't seen Call Me by Your Name, but this guy is I'm sorry, I think is it a guy? Yeah,
I think so.
Okay, sorry. But yeah, the director, he is very good at like just like his directing style like can really portrays like this sense of like tension and dread. Like this isn't really a spoiler, but there's a scene where they're making Dakota Johnson, like they're just making her jump, but it's like such like a tense scene, just the way that it's filmed and like cutting to her feet and like hitting the floor. Like the sound is so good. It's just like there's really nothing to it. It's just like a person jumping, but yeah, you do kind of feel the sense of like dread and suspense while you're watching it.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think separates this from the original in a lot of ways is that it's kind of about a few things that the original I don't think was to the same extent. There's a lot of
Yeah.
the political climate of Germany and Berlin that's a part of the movie.
Oh yeah, yeah.
There's definitely some elements of feminism in there, and kind of like it has something to say. I think a lot more than the original did. I think the original, well, there might have been some subtext in there for a couple of things. Ultimately, was more about the style, and the other stuff that was there was just kind of like subtle, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this movie, it feels like it's got a lot more going on under the surface, where there's a lot more things going on. Sometimes it's less than subtle, sometimes it's pretty subtle. It kind of depends on the scene and what's happening. But because there's a lot of like you'll hear like parts of news broadcasts about what's going on in the country at the time. There's a lot of those things kind of sprinkled throughout to give you this context.
Yeah, and like one of the things you mentioned before, when we did the review of the originals, you kind of were talking about how you don't really get much of a sense of the school itself. Like you get that there's a person at a school, but you don't really deal with the politics of it, the other people in the school that much. Like it it just feels more like a creepy place for these girls to be at. While this, it does actually feel like a school, and you actually do get like more of a sense of how it operates and works, and like what it's like living there. And it feels like it's more important to the story than just like, all right, we just need like a location for these witches to be.
Yeah, there's a lot more dancing in this one, and they kind of use the dance like you were mentioning with the jumping. The direction kind of uses it to build this kind of thing, and the dancing can be quite hypnotic at times. It can be kind of awkward at other times. It's just always intentional of what it's doing.
Yeah, it feels very almost like a ritualistic kind of dancing, and like I think once they do have the performance, I think you kind of get an idea, like because in the first one, I think I always assumed it was some type of kind of like ballet school or something. Whereas this, it's much more like, oh, it feels like they're doing a kind of like an artsy interpretive dance kind of thing. Especially like when they have that performance towards the end.
I would say that it's that, but it's clearly based on something that witches would do. Like you get this feeling like
that's the other thing. Like
it looks like witches dancing around the campfire at one point, and I'm like, yeah, this is what it is.
Yeah, and it's but I mean it works, yeah, because like as a viewer, oh, okay, yeah, this is probably has something to do with some type of ritual or magic that they're trying to conduct, but at the same time, it seems like something maybe kind of like a snooty art person would go see, like, oh, this interpretive dance group is playing at the metro tonight, let's go.
And it's supposed to be mentioned as well, Tilda Swinton actually plays a second character. She plays
Oh, did you know this going in?
I did not know.
Cause I actually didn't realize it, and my friend told me when we were leaving the theater, like, oh yeah, I can't believe she was great as the that therapist guy, and like my mind was blown. I was like, wait, are you serious? Like that was her? Like,
so it's funny, I looked it up after like 10 minutes because I thought he looked kind of weird. There was like something about him that felt off, like something didn't feel natural.
I mean, one of the things I thought, and again, like, won't go into spoilers, but like, by the end of the movie, they're doing some like crazy stuff with them, and like I kind of had this thought in my head, like, oh, this poor old man, like he must be like so weirded out.
Nah, it's Tilda Swinton. Just doing.
No, she's I'll go on the record here. Tilda Swinton's great. She's a good actress.
She's
controversial.
I don't think it is, but she brings this intensity to the role of Blanc or Blanc, however you pronounce it. I don't do well with the French, but she's pretty good. But she's good in this role as well. And this therapist who Patricia goes to see at the start of the film is kind of the one kind of like spearheading some kind of investigation as to what's going on at the school. And he has a backstory as well. He lost his wife during the war. His wife was Jewish, and he sent her away during the Nazi occupation. Not occupation. He's in Berlin. It's not occupation, but you know what I mean. When the Nazis were in power, but like.
So there's this kind of story throughout the whole movie where he's wondering what happened to her.
Yeah,
you know,
survivor's guilt is basically
sad.
what you'd say. Yeah, there's a survivor's guilt to him that's really sad, and so you have this character, and the movie like it is very slow. It has like these key points where it spikes with something really like absurd or something really horrific, but other than that, it's a lot of mood, it's a lot of tension, and I was into pretty much all of that stuff. There was maybe. You know, one or two. There was maybe like one or two scenes here or there where I thought like, okay, this probably could be shortened or cut because it's maybe just, you know, like I think at one point there was like it was cutting between all the witches having like dinner and laughing with the girls walking around, and I was like, this feels like it could probably just go. Like this is probably like 5 minutes it could be cut and like just shorten the runtime. I didn't need this scene, but like you know that was few and far between. Like as much as I'm like 2.5 hours is a bit too long, there was not that much I'd cut really if I really looked at it.
Yeah, I mean the second time watching it again, I did feel the length more, but I would be kind of hard pressed to find. Like little scenes here and there you can probably trim down, but I can't really think of like too much that I would get rid of, and because again it's like a there's so much like atmosphere in it that even if it is a scene that maybe someone might think that is dull or something, like it still looks really good and shot really good, and you're getting invested in the characters and stuff that it doesn't usually matter as much.
So, I think we do have to give a spoiler warning now because I think to talk about what the movie's about and the themes and obviously where it goes plot wise, we have to go to spoilers. So full spoilers now for Suspiria 2018. So the big difference, I'm kind of just skipping to the end and then we'll work our way back with all things. But the big difference here, I think, between this and the original is the twist, right? Where. So we hear throughout the film that there was these three matrons that the witches all kind of like worship, right? I can't remember the name of them all too, but the third one was Mother or Matron Suspirium, or obviously where the title of the film comes from. And they have this mother Marcos, who's the leader of the coven, who claims she is actually the inhabitant of one of these three matrons.
Yeah,
and. There's this power struggle between her and Blanc. Blanc kind of wants to like change things in the coven, but Marcos doesn't. So it becomes this kind of divide between the witches, and that kind of mirrors the divide of what's going on politically in Germany at the time, right? That's kind of why we're hearing about these things throughout the course of the movie. It's the idea of the new wanting to replace the old, but the old is latching on to the power, and that's what Marcos says. She's the old, Blanc's the new. And they're basically training up Susie because they want Susie to be this new body for Marcos. Marcos is going to take her body and be young again. That's what they're building her up to the whole film. The twist in the film, though, is that Susie is actually Matron Suspirium. Like she basically realizes over the course of the film that she is Matron Suspirium, and during the ritual where they were going to transfer Marcos into her, she brings out like her inner demon that goes around and kills the witches in the room. Well, not all of them, just the ones who were against the ones who were for Marcos get killed.
Yeah. No. Wait. So one thing I wasn't completely sure about is were they saying that like she's always been Suspirium, or was it more like Suspirium like entered her body like at some point, like when she came to the school or whatever?
No, I took it as she was always secretly her. I think because in some of the dreams she has of her flashbacks of her childhood, she sees that shape, the sort of glimmering
that, like,
light,
kind of twinkly light,
So I took that as being it was always kind of inside her. She just didn't know about it until now.
Yeah, basically, like towards the end.
So the demon thing, like this is a weird twist to like sort of comprehend because I'm like, wait, what? Like she's been like this thing the whole time, because that is so different from the original. And then on top of that, you have this demon coming around killing everyone. Now the demon killing the witches I was fine with, right, to a point.
Oh yeah.
What I didn't like in this scene is I thought Marcos, like her like prosthetics, who also is also played by Tilda Swinton, which is worth mentioning.
Yeah.
She's this ridiculous, disgusting, like really old, like it's a fake body. It's like they've done this prosthetic. There's like, random hands also coming out of her arm and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I thought this looked a bit stupid, right? And it kind of took me out of it. Instead of being her, because there was like scenes earlier on when like Sarah was investigating some of the hidden rooms and stuff, and she finds that like that like portrait of both Blanc and Marcos, right? But the frame is like random human hair, like just like held together by gunk. And I'm like, that's disgusting and kind of dark and sinister, and I kind of like it because of that. This was the opposite at the end with Marcos, where she just looked like a stupid thing out of like a really bad B movie. Like it took me out of the tone of the film seeing her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't really have that reaction. Like I thought, like I mean, it worked for me because I thought she was just like utterly disgusting. Like I mean, yeah, obviously, if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was kind of like a cool design. Remind me of like kind of something from Hellraiser. It kind of looks like that. I think its name is Butterball or whatever. Like one like kind of like fatter Hellraiser Cenobite.
She looks like Butterball.
And I love Butterball, but yeah, no, it worked for me. I think mostly just because of like how like gross and insane, it looked at that point.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I mean, because I think I like the epilogue, right? Because the movie's actually split into acts. There's like these like act titles that come up. There's 6 acts and an epilogue. And I like the epilogue because so basically they trick the old man, Dr. Kempler, to come to the school by like pretending that his wife has come back and found him, but it's all just like an hallucination or like a spell, right? And he's brought in and he's stripped down naked and he's there to witness this transference because he's a witness. And after Susie like takes power as Suspiria, she goes back to him the next day and basically gives him the answers that he's never had about his wife. It's like, oh, your wife did try and get out of the country, but she was captured here and she died in a concentration camp. And it was this story about how the guards made them all stand in the cold and a lot of them froze to death. And she like died with 2 other women that she sort of befriended, so she didn't die alone, and she died thinking of you. And it was this kind of sweet moment. Her telling him, not the death itself, but like her telling him this.
Yeah.
And ultimately she says, look, the world needs to have guilt and pain and regret about everything that's happened, but not you. And she takes away his memories of everyone, of all the women that have been part of the story, essentially, including his wife, so he can basically live in peace until he dies, because he's really old.
Yeah.
And,
oh yeah, super old.
And so to me, the themes of the film going into the whole like the idea of the RAF trying to like take control of Germany politically with the attacks and stuff. Like I kind of took this as, so the coven, like there's the old witches and the sort of newer witches, and the newer witches want to like advance and go forward. And the idea is that the older witches have been basically abusing their power for like a long time, and that kind of relates to like fascism and Nazi Germany. Because even at the end, before Susie comes in, he's looking at his ID papers, like it actually says Aryan ID papers on it that he's looking at, and it's this idea of the guilt, but it's the idea that he isn't actually should feel guilty about anything because he's never actually he. Much like the ritual itself, he has been a witness to all this rise of awful like power and the corruption of that power. So he is not necessarily indebted to feel the regret or the pain of it, in the same way that Susie and the other witches would want other people to feel.
Wait, so are you trying to say that older people in positions of power maybe don't want to relinquish that power? Is that? That's kind of a crazy concept. I don't know if that ever actually happened.
Tim, the tone of your sentence right from the very first word told me that this was going to be a sarcastic joke. There was no twist to this.
Get rid of old people.
But yeah,
they're
essentially
ruining the world.
Yeah, essentially that's what we're saying. We're saying that Marcos and her followers corrupted the power and were abusing it. And Suspiria should have said, no, she isn't like embodying one of us. Like, I'm a real one, and like, I'm going to take back control. and it's like the new generation. So I think the movie's about that.
She starts exploding heads.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, this is after, of course, Marcos actually slits or snaps back Tilda Swinton's head because she tries to tell Susie she can back out of this if something doesn't feel right about it, because it has to be pure. She has to like be willing to do this. And then another thing, going back to the feminism side, like the idea of that story, the idea that his wife died in kind of peace because she was surrounded by other women who supported her. Because one of the things that the awful witches say to him as he's been like taken into the school is that, oh, you have dismissed many women's pain as delusions, and as you've kind of, instead of trying to help and pitying them, you've called them delusions. So there's definitely themes of that kind of throughout, this idea that these witch covens maybe banded together because they weren't like treated as well or seriously by others in society, specifically the men, obviously, but like just in general. This idea that there's strength in unity, there's strength in bonding between them, and I think the movie's doing stuff with that, and I think it's saying something with that. But and it's kind of why I like that final scene in the bedroom is because it's like she's saying, no, you're not actually guilty of much of what you are a witness to the awful things that have happened, but you're not necessarily as guilty of it as other people. Because she says, I wouldn't have let this happen to you. What my fellow witches did, I would not have approved of. So she's kind of here to fix it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's what attracted the director to this movie, or made him want to do it, because like all the horror stuff, I really like it. It does get crazy and batshit, and I am all here for that. But then this story of the therapist, it kind of feels like it's like the heart and soul of the movie. Like it's actually surprisingly sweet and poignant. So I wonder maybe if that was kind of like his goal, or one of the reasons why he wanted to do this, is to kind of actually tell this like weirdly touching story in the middle of this batshit crazy witch movie where like heads are exploding and like demons are coming and there's like reanimated like corpses and stuff. Like it's
we should probably talk about the scene that I think you were alluding to earlier, which is when Susie's dancing properly for the first time. They have her kind of linked to the girl who tried to run away in another room, and we basically, as Susie dances, this other girl's like body parts kind of mimic the movements, but in an extreme way where her like bones are breaking and she's like snapping backwards and all that.
It's just, I mean, it's hard to describe because I mean, just saying like, oh yeah, it's basically a girl that's kind of like dancing and getting crushed and pushed up against stuff. I feel like it doesn't do it justice. When you actually watch it, it's so visceral and like, man, like
the directing, the performance, and the sound effects, I think, are all really important here to sell this. Yeah,
and there's just like these like instances where it like she's like trying to scream, but like her face is twisting and like drool's coming out, and especially the sound work in the scene really really like like gets into your bones and makes you like feel like, oh. But I mean, in terms of body horror, like really like this is like one of the like best scenes I've ever seen.
It's great, and it's probably the first big showy scene in the movie. Like it's a good half hour in, maybe 35 minutes in, and it's like, no, here's what we can do. Here's like some of the crazier stuff that you're going to see. So it was a nice time to do that, I think, in the film, just in terms of like pulling us in for some of the crazy stuff. And we basically see as well, just like as the film goes on, like just how much power the witches have. They make people see things that aren't there. They're following people. There's two detectives who come. That the old man actually sends some detectives to them.
Yeah, I actually thought this was kind of a funny scene.
Oh yeah,
they basically just freeze a detective.
The detectives leave thinking they've searched the building, but in actual fact, Susie actually sees like two of the older witches. Basically, they've got them in a back room, and they've got them, their pants are off, and they're just laughing at their dicks, and that's like that's the scene. But it's like you get this kind of playful viciousness from them, that they're just like doing this. But it's a really effective scene. There's a lot of nudity in this, by the way, just for the record.
Hells yeah.
The big climax scene.
I don't think Marcos really wears anything.
Oh yeah, it's all fake though. At least. But I was actually thinking, because the old man's naked when he's witnessing all this stuff, and I was like, Wait, that's a fake penis. This
Oh yeah.
it's all fake.
You immediately started looking at the credits trying to find who makes it so you can reach out to them.
How dare you?
Do you make that in a size?
During this big climax, though, like there's like a lot of the dancers are there. They're also naked and all dancing around this middle kind of formation of people, and it's all very tribal. It's all very ritualistic. It's all this kind of thing. But yeah, like I think there's just parts of this scene that's just a little bit over the top for me. Mainly Marcus himself.
I mean, to me, like it almost felt like, I don't know, they saw the ending of like Hereditary something, and they were like, "Oh, that's cute, but we can go bigger." Like it's really really out there. But again, like, hey, I'm all for going big and crazy.
I mean,
it's like everything is like it, and it's like it seems like about everything on film is like red at that point. Like there's just like this, like the whole room is basically like coated in like kind of looks like it's like coated in blood.
And it's the first,
so many reds.
And it's the first time the film really has that much color. Like basically, Susie realizing what she is in a scene before this, where there's like some of her dream sequences. They all like it cuts between various shots, but each shot turns red. Like it turns red, then cuts to another shot, and it turns red. And I think that's like her kind of like the moment where she becomes Suspirium. And then in this scene, everything gets bathed in red. And you know, because we said that this film is very muted in terms of colors throughout the whole thing. And this is
like
the
a lot
only
of grays and browns and stuff, like
and tans, and you know. Whereas
it's like constantly basically raining like the whole movie, so it's like there's not you don't even really get like a lot of sunlight or anything.
And then this big finale, like, it's just bathed in red, so it's like now we're cutting to the jugular, as it were. In some cases, literal. It's also worth mentioning Susie, you know, as Suspirium goes up to like the girls who, you know, Patricia, Sarah, and another one, but there's the three that are in the middle who were, you know, kidnapped at various stages in the film and used by the witches. And you know, Patricia herself looks really bad. Like her skin looks awful. Obviously, it's a lot of prosthetics and stuff. And it's like, what do you want? And they all ask for death. So she mercifully kills all three of them. So it's this idea that she's going to be a more just like leader for the witches. So some of the old witches are still alive. The ones who did not, you know, the ones who were against Marcos are remaining.
Yeah, because it harkens back to I think they actually replay like some of the clips earlier from. There's a scene where they're basically like voting, I guess, who's going to be, you know, the leader. You know, some are voting for Marcos or Blanc, and then I think originally you just hear the voices, and then at this time they actually show the people like voting for them.
Yeah, and in between each one, it like kills each person, you know, as it goes around them. Yeah, and yeah, so yeah, big finish. But I think the real star of this movie though is the slow burn. I think it's the slow kind of. I don't want to say it's got this feeling of dread kind of like ticking down throughout it. It's kind of a little bit different to that. But there is this feeling of like always being watched. There's this feeling of there's things going behind the scenes the entire time.
Yeah, like a slow burn's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you know, if a movie's slow and boring, that can be pretty hard. And yeah, this is slow, but you're still interested and captivated by what's going on. Like it's you know, make sure to set the time aside, but you know, you know, it doesn't really feel like by the end of it you're like, oh, I just wasted, you know, 2.5 hours.
Yeah. You know, we mentioned obviously Swinton. You know, Dakota Johnson's pretty good. It's funny. Obviously, like I just knew her as the 50 Shades of Grey person, like for a while. But you know, I like Bad Times at El Royale, and I liked her in this, so she's kind of building up a little, you know, filmography of things post 50 Shades, where I'm like, oh no, she's actually pretty good. She was in shite for a few years.
Yeah, I don't know if I really saw her in something in anything else, but I like I knew the name, from 50 Shades and stuff. And
you saw Bad Times at El Royale, did you not?
No, not yet. It came out around the time I got married.
Oh, that's so right. That's right. It's good point.
Busy. Yeah. Not sure if it's. I'm sure at some point that seems to me like an HBO streaming movie or something. At some point, I'll watch it.
No, it's a fun movie. I'd recommend watching Bad Times at El Royale.
And there's a there's a scene where one of the witches kills themselves earlier in the movie. They stab themselves in the neck, and that's another like really brutal scene. Like there's these like there's like these big set pieces, but then there are also like a few like that's not subtle, but it is a nice like gory scene in the middle of the movie.
Yeah, you get the impression she's just like basically like miserable about like where this is going, because Marcos is like remaining in power, and she just kind of stands up and stabs herself in the neck. And you actually overhear like when Sarah's creeping around, because she hears them, like she hears like it's the middle of the night, and she hears the witches moving around, and she's heard from the old man that there's maybe some secret rooms, and she kind of looks for listening for where this noise is coming from. It leads her to the room with the weird creepy hair frame that we mentioned. She ends up stealing the hook, because we know they have hooks. Oh
yeah.
She overhears them speaking, and they're obviously frantically trying to do something. It sounds like they could have maybe healed her, but because one of them says no, she stabbed herself too quick, or the next stab was too sudden and quick. We can't do anything. It kind of sounds like, depending on what the injury is, because at one point Sarah breaks her leg when she was sneaking around during the dance, and
that's another like really brutal scene. Like you see the bone coming out,
because she finds Patricia, and she knows all this is going on now. And they actually put her in kind of a trance and heal her leg and put her back into the dance, because the big dance recital's happening when this is all going on at this point. But it's an interesting film.
Did you see there's actually an after credits scene?
I didn't, and then I was just looking up stuff quickly before we started, and it mentioned it, and I quickly put it back on and went to the end. It's not much. But the director seemed to imply that it was leading to something, like there might actually be more Suspiria.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it would be kind of interesting. Like, I mean, I really like this movie, so if he wants to do another one, I wouldn't disregard that. But I guess maybe it does seem like a little bit weird movie to do a sequel to. Doesn't really feel necessary, but I guess if he has more to say, I'd give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Obviously the movie's set in Berlin, and obviously it's during the time of East and West Berlin, when it was split due to the Cold War and the Iron Curtain and all that. And I think the final shot of the movie is actually the initials of the old man and his wife from when they were younger on a wall, but it's on a corner of a wall, so it's actually split down the middle. So I think the movie, if nothing else, is about divides. It's about one side versus the other side, and what is right is what is wrong. And I think that's why maybe him and his wife are the heart of the movie, because they were from two different sides and they loved each other, and there was no like conflict between them in the same way that every other two divides in the movie seem to have. So I think there's subtext in this movie, which is great.
Oh, sure.
I don't think the first film had a ton of that. I mean, it did have a little bit, but this feels like it's more about something, which I appreciate. Maybe the big climax where she turns out to be Suspiria will play better for me on a second viewing. Like, I think it might play better. I mean, I think Mother Marcos is always going to look a bit silly to me, because it feels like something that should be in like an Evil Dead movie or something like that, as opposed to this more serious take.
It kind of It also reminded me of like it's not she's not as big, but I don't know if you remember in the first Blade movie.
Yeah,
one like really fat vampire.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I hated that in Blade as well, for the record. It was stupid.
You gotta stop body shaming these these people.
It's fake. It's not the real bodies, damn it. Jesus. But our cast is good. Atmosphere is great. The slow burn is great. But yeah, I mean, you do feel the length a little bit. I think I certainly did. I think with a bit of intelligent trimming, you could probably get this down at least another 15 minutes. Which would still be a long horror movie, admittedly, but just to tighten up here or there. But
and do you have any thoughts? Like, I mean, I think it's pretty subdued, but what do you think about the music? Because I think it was a big deal coming out, because it's a guy from Radiohead, I think.
Oh, really?
That did it.
It's a lot more subtle. There's definitely one or two scenes that stick out to me. Like, the endings get quite a sweet little theme that plays as it finishes. There's a couple of good little pieces that play here or there.
And I mean, I don't know if this would count as the music, but like during the the big crazy ending sequence, there's kind of like this. Again, it kind of like feels like tribal chanting of this kind of this chanting and like people slapping the ground and stuff, which but it sounds really good and it's effective. But yeah, I mean and again it's like a total 180 from Goblin in the
Yeah.
original movie. But it works with this movie, I feel like.
This is one of those things when people say that if they're going to do a remake, they should do their own thing with it, and this is definitely an example of that.
But I feel like people, I mean, I don't know what the general consensus of this movie is. So I feel like some people weren't crazy about that, but for that kind of reason. But I don't know. It's like, well,
I think it
just watch the original if you want.
Yeah, I think it reviewed well. Like critically, it went down quite well. I think critics quite liked it, but
I know there's an article going around. I think it was like actually recently too, just last week, which actually I haven't read. I just saw like the headline, but Dario Argento said he was not pleased with the movie. But I don't know. It feels like a little clickbaity, but I don't know.
Yeah, like I never trust these things really, because usually they'll take one line out of context and try and spin it into some drama.
Yeah, it's usually like a headline like Dario Argento hates the new Suspiria, and then you read it and he's like, I don't know, I would have done some things different, and it's like, all right, well that's not the same, like.
Yeah, or I'll be like, no, he'll say he's not watched it yet, and the headline will be Dario Argento refuses to watch new Suspiria because he's angry about it. I'm like, no.
I'll tell you what though, I do like I don't know if you'd say drama or whatever, but I like the stuff coming out with the new Child's Play movie, and I do like the people that are sticking up for Don Mancini and the original and saying like, yeah, screw this. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll be getting that new movie. We'll be getting a TV show because the TV show's got a home now. It's going to be in sci-fi, so we got a Child's Play coming. But so
Child's Play Krypton crossover. Can't wait.
That'd work. That would work.
I mean, if you give Chucky a kryptonite knife, I mean, I don't know who I'd pick in that scenario.
So no, I mean, ultimately Suspiria is a pretty solid and inventful artistic film, which I don't think everything about it works, but it definitely comes from a place of a filmmaker with a vision. There's a clear vision here, and while it might not necessarily all add up to exactly what I think would be a perfect movie, for lack of a better word, like I feel like some of the subtext doesn't maybe like round out or doesn't go as far as it wants to. I feel like like some of the stuff maybe doesn't need as much focus on it. Like I almost wonder, like as great as the subtext about the divide of the country and all the political climates going on, like did it have to be like actually shown to us throughout the film? Could it not be there as just subtext as opposed to let's take time to have all these radio and news broadcasts kind of like spattered throughout? Like
that stuff feels a little more forced. Like I think like the kind of the stuff in the beginning where like you'd hear people talking about Patricia, if she's working with like I forget what like the the group was called or whatever, but basically RAF, and then like then sometimes when you would just hear like explosion or police sirens in the background.
For the record, which not to be confused with the Royal Air Force from the UK, that's not what that's RAF stands for. Just for the record.
Oh yeah, of course not.
Because people are probably going to try, but no, RAF was the British. No. It's like also an acronym of a group in Berlin in the 70s.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, like the that kind of more subtle stuff where it's just going on in the background is good. But yeah, sometimes it's just very blatant where a radio will just turn on and they're like, hey, this is going on. And it's like, all right.
Because I think you get most of the themes from the story about the doctor, like the story of him and his wife and how she had to leave.
Yeah,
I think that gives you most of the subtext for that anyway. So maybe that's another thing I'd maybe cut. It would be all those radio and like news segments. But I mean, yeah, like so. Even though it doesn't always necessarily add up to something great, and I do hate one of the makeup things towards the end. Like it's clearly a vision, and I can't help but respect it for that. And most of it is quite good as well. Like most of it does work, and most of it is kind of an engaging, kind of slow burn. Like I'd compare it to something like Rosemary's Baby or maybe even The Shining or something like that, where it's more of a slower build with some high points later on. And But it does have some body horror, it does have some good performances, and it has all these things. So, with that in mind, Timmy, what would you be rating Suspiria?
I think like when I saw it in theaters, if you would have asked me like as I was leaving the theaters, I was really hyped on it. So I feel like I would have gone, you know, almost as high as like a 9, probably more like an 8.5. But watching it the second time, like there's still a lot I like, but there's also more stuff that I noticed. Just mostly, kind of like the length and some stuff like that. So I'm going a little bit further down to an 8. I still think it's great, but yeah, it's really beautiful, and there's a lot great performances, and when the horror does happen, it is really shocking and disturbing. But it's not perfect though. Yeah.
Yeah, I was conflicted because obviously there's a couple of things I don't like, but I think I'm also going to go with an 8 because I think I respect the focus and the vision of it, and so much of it is effective that I can't really fault it even. And I think some of the things that played a bit weirdly, I think the twist for me played weird this time. That might be something that plays better when I know what's coming. Like when I'm watching the movie through that lens the second time, I think that might play better for me. So I'm also going to give it an 8 out of 10, which for the record is higher than I rated the original. Just pointing that out.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page as the original. Yeah, I forget. I think I gave it something in the 7. So yeah, this one's slightly higher for me. Not that both aren't good. I do like both, but yeah, I think this one maybe, like you said, has a little bit more to say. There's a little bit more to grasp on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were both of the opinion that the original Suspiria was maybe a touch overrated because everyone seems to herald it as the main Argento film, and I think he has several other films that are better. But
oh yeah.
So so it's not a disrespect on Argento. It's just I think some of his other stuff is better than Suspiria. So
I know. I mean, we're very pro Argento on this podcast. I really like his movies.
And compare this to the end of the original as well. The original film, like. The main girl finally sees some witching happening, sees the old woman, and then just runs out as the place burns. That is the ending. This is like, no, the girl turns out to be the super witch and kills half the witches and takes control of it. There's a lot more going on here at the end for sure.
Also, like the ending with the original, it is actually kind of a shock. Like it just like the frame just freezes and then the credits start coming up. You're kind of like, oh really? Like this, it gives you more time to breathe and. Lets the ending kind of settle in and creep up on you instead of just being like boom, the end.
Yeah. So there you go. That is Suspiria, the remake from 2018. So let us know what you think of the film in the comments below. You can like and subscribe and then comment. Of course, all those things do help. As of course does go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV where you can support the show and the channel, everything we do here. Starting in March, we're doing a new thing where every month on Patreon, patrons will get an exclusive bonus episode of Screams After Midnight at the $1 tier. So if you want to be a patron for $1, you'll get an extra episode per month starting in March. And then on top of that, of course, the $5 tier gets to vote on an episode every month, the patrons pick, which of course you should be familiar with if you've been watching us for a while now. But you can go over to Patreon and see some of that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at Screams Midnight. But this has been Screams After Midnight. This has been Suspiria 2018. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening, and we always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we will see you next time.